She wasn't supposed to be home until Friday. But one change of plans exposed everything she was never meant to see. A car that wasn't hers. A woman she didn't know. And her husband standing there, holding roses. Roses that weren't for her. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories. If you've ever trusted someone with your whole heart, only to question if they ever deserved even a piece of it, then this story is for you. It's not just about betrayal, it's about clarity, about what happens when silence becomes truth, and when love, real love, is no longer confused with loyalty to someone who's been lying. Tap like, hit subscribe, and stay with this one until the final word. Because when Celine Ward walked into her own home a day early, she didn't just catch her billionaire husband in the act. She caught herself falling out of love. For the last time, Celine Ward hadn't planned to be home until Friday evening. Her conference in Houston was set to end with a late-night gala, but when the final workshop wrapped early Thursday afternoon, she decided to skip the fluff. She was tired of the noise, the networking, the forced conversations. She wanted her own space, her own bed, and her husband. Brennan had kissed her goodbye at the airport 5 days ago with his usual calm affection. A warm hand on her lower back, a small smile, a reminder to rest well. His life was always moving fast, board meetings, deal closings, startup founders flying in and out of Atlanta to pitch for funding. Celine had always accepted that part of him. It was part of what made him successful. But the space between them had grown without either of them noticing. He was often too busy to talk for long. She was usually buried in grant applications, field projects, or interviews for her non-profit. Still, she believed the love was there. Quiet, maybe, but real. So when she changed her flight and landed back in Atlanta before dusk, she thought it would be a good surprise. She didn't text. She didn't call. She wanted to walk in, take off her heels, and crawl onto their bed beside him without warning. The black town car dropped her at the gate. She entered the passcode. The gate slid open. Her suitcase rolled smoothly over the driveway's pavers. But when she pulled around to the front, her eyes narrowed. There was a car parked at an angle near the front steps. White, sleek, compact, definitely not one of theirs. A coupe, new, clean. Subtle but showy. Her first thought wasn't suspicion. It was practicality. Maybe Brennan's assistant, maybe someone from the design firm coming to finalize the home office remodel. Maybe he had scheduled a late meeting. She shook her head, brushing the thoughts aside, as she stepped onto the porch. The house was quiet, not eerily so, just still. The scent of burning cedar floated from somewhere inside, subtle and clean. Her heels clicked softly on the marble floor as she walked through the foyer. Then she saw them. Just past the archway into the sitting room, under the soft glow of recessed lights, 2 figures. Brennan stood tall, shoulders back, wearing the grey cashmere sweater she'd given him on their 2nd anniversary. In his hands, roses, red, full bloom, long-stemmed, the kind he knew she didn't like because the thorns were too sharp. The woman facing him wore a black midi dress and cream heels. She was smiling, familiar, not with Celine, but with him. Celine froze. She couldn't hear what was being said, but she didn't need to. The body language told its own story, the way the woman tilted her chin, the way Brennan's gaze held steady, the way he stepped forward and handed her the roses like he'd done it 100 times before. Then, the kiss. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't on the cheek. It was slow, natural, intimate. Celine didn't move. Her hand gripped the handle of her suitcase so tightly her knuckles paled. She didn't gasp. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She turned, walked out, pulled the door shut with the same care she used when closing books. Her world didn't end with a bang. It ended with a whisper she couldn't unhear. The drive from Buckhead to downtown Atlanta blurred. No tears, no music, just the hum of the engine and the static in her chest. She didn't call anyone, didn't answer the handful of texts from colleagues asking if she'd landed safely. She booked a room at a quiet boutique hotel she'd once visited for a fundraiser and checked in under her non-profit's name. It was easier than spelling out Ward through clenched teeth. Once inside the room, she placed her phone face down on the nightstand. The robe was soft. The air smelled like eucalyptus, but nothing could settle the noise in her head. Celine sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. 3 years. 3 years of shared promises, private jokes, family holidays, dinner parties, and whispered apologies in the dark. 3 years of compromise, of understanding, of growing separately, but still together. At least she thought they were. Was it new? Was that the first time? Did the roses mean it wasn't? She laid back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, her chest rising and falling without rhythm. She hadn't just lost trust. She'd lost certainty. And that was worse. At 6:07 a.m., her phone buzzed. "Brennan, babe, you okay? Got in late last night. Didn't see you." Celine stared at the message. Blank. Numb. He was still pretending. Still lying. Still himself. She didn't waste energy crafting a response. "Celine, I'm fine. I came back early, staying downtown." 3 dots appeared. Paused. Appeared again. Then finally, "Brennan, wait. What? Why didn't you say something? I would have picked you up." Her stomach turned. Not from anger, but from clarity. He wasn't just dishonest. He was unbothered. Or worse, too used to deceiving. She typed slowly. "Celine, I saw you." She waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Nothing. Then, "Brennan, please. Let's talk. It's not what it looked like." Celine didn't respond. She closed her eyes. It was always what it looked like. And now, she finally saw him for who he really was. The sun crawled slowly through the blinds, tracing thin gold lines across the hotel room's floor. Celine hadn't slept. Not truly. She'd closed her eyes. Her body had stayed still, but her mind ran. And it didn't stop, just looped the same moment over and over again. The roses. The woman's smile. His hand on her back. The kiss. Brennan had kissed her like he'd done it before. Like there wasn't a single voice in his head telling him to pause. And maybe there wasn't. Maybe Celine had been the only one playing by the rules of their marriage for a while now. Her phone buzzed again. "Brennan, Celine, please. I made a mistake. It wasn't anything serious." She didn't respond. "Brennan, it was stupid. I should have never let her come over. I'll explain everything." Still nothing from her. Then, "Brennan, are you safe?" That one caught her off guard. Safe. She sat up in bed, picked up her phone, and typed slowly. "Celine, yes. I'm safe. I'm not the one who lost control." She tossed the phone onto the bed, walked into the bathroom, turned the faucet too hard. Water splashed across the sink. She stared at her reflection. Her curls were pinned up, but loose strands had fallen during the night. Her eyes looked tired, but clear. For the first time in months, she didn't feel uncertain about what she saw in the mirror. Brennan always made her feel like he was the center of their world, the one with the empire, the schedule, the pace. But she had her own. She had built her non-profit from the ground up, advocated for women, lobbied for policy change, led campaigns, mentored high school girls who had no one else to look up to. And somehow, she still spent years making herself smaller so her marriage could feel stable. Until now. She grabbed her tablet, opened her notes app, and created a fresh page. Title, Exit Plan. And secure separation attorney and Janessa. Check schedule for lunch and withdraw from Civic Futures Fund. Initiative with Brennan and finalize interview with Atlanta Tribune and cancel anniversary trip, St. Lucia. Her fingers paused. That trip, she remembered when he booked it. Months ago, after a long week where they barely saw each other, he'd surprised her with the email confirmation and said, "Let's reset, yeah?" She smiled then, believed him, told her board she'd missed the first 2 days of their spring conference. Now it felt like a joke. A cover, maybe it always was. By 10 a.m., she was in the hotel's cafe, laptop open, phone face down. Janessa called her, the second she saw the email cancelling the St. Lucia trip. "You okay?" Janessa's voice was low and direct. "I will be." There was a pause. "Do I need to come down there?" "No," Celine said. "But I need lunch, real food, and no pity." Janessa laughed softly. "You got it. 1 o'clock. Table at Brass Fork." They met at the corner booth, like they always did when something big hit the fan. Janessa slid into the seat across from her and immediately waved the waitress down. "Whatever she orders, double it," she said. Celine gave a faint smile. "You want to talk?" Janessa asked. Celine nodded. He lied. Then he lied again. That's the whole story. Janessa didn't press. She just waited. After a few minutes, Celine added, "I saw him. With someone else. At the house. He was holding flowers. They kissed." Janessa's lips parted. But she didn't say anything right away. "I didn't cry," Celine said. "I didn't yell. I just left. You're allowed to feel what you feel, Celine. Shock doesn't need a reaction." "I feel clear," she said, voice low. "More than I have in a long time." Their food came. They ate in silence for a few bites. Janessa watched her carefully. "What are you going to do?" Celine wiped her mouth and leaned back. "I'm done," she said simply. "No therapy? No, let's talk about it." "I already did. For years. I just didn't know I was the only one trying." After lunch, she walked 2 blocks to a law firm recommended by a close friend in policy circles. She didn't want noise or press. Just the cleanest path out. The attorney, a black woman in her late 40s named Kendra Reese, didn't blink when Celine laid out what happened. "Prenup." "Yes." "Infidelity clause?" Celine nodded. "Proof?" "I saw it with my own eyes." Kendra's voice remained cool and direct. "We'll handle it." Celine exhaled. For the first time that day, she felt her chest lighten. By evening, Brennan called again. This time, she answered. Not because she wanted to, because she needed to hear his voice one last time, without wanting anything from it. "I've been calling," he said. "I didn't know what to say. You've had time to prepare for lies before. What made this time harder?" His breath caught. "I didn't sleep with her." "You kissed her, Brennan." I panicked. It wasn't planned. She came to talk business. It got confusing. "No," Celine cut him off. "Don't insult me like that." He went silent. "I loved you. I respected you. And even when you weren't showing up, I showed grace." She let the silence stretch. "You don't get access to me just because you're ashamed now." "I'll do anything to fix this," he said. "Therapy. A reset. I just need a chance to explain everything in person." "I don't want an explanation," she said. "I want peace." "Celine, please. We built a life." "No," she said calmly. "I built a life. You were in it. But I built it." She ended the call, then deleted the thread, blocked the number, put her phone on silent. Then she walked to the hotel window and looked out over the city. The lights blinked from high-rises. Cars crawled down Peachtree like they always did. But inside her, something had shifted permanently. She wasn't broken. She was done. By Sunday morning, Celine Ward had already signed the first round of legal papers. No media statements, no dramatic tears, just sharp ink on firm paper. Clean, focused, permanent. She'd sent copies to Kendra for filing, then opened her laptop and submitted her withdrawal. From the Civic Futures Fund, one of the city's largest public-private partnerships. It had been the one project she and Brennan had co-chaired, the same one where he promised they'd finally merge worlds and work side by side. Celine didn't write a long explanation, just one line. "In light of personal conflicts of interest, I am respectfully stepping down." Let the city read between the lines. Her inbox flooded within hours. Board members were confused. City council reps asked if she was okay. Donors speculated. Celine didn't reply. She'd already spoken all she needed to speak. Across town, Brennan was pacing inside the walls of their estate. His phone was never more than an inch from his hand. His assistant had been instructed to block all calls except Celine's. He hadn't gone into the office since Wednesday. He'd cancelled 2 major meetings. He was spiraling, and his polished calm was cracking. He called his friend Nolan. "She won't talk to me." Nolan, tired, sighed on the other end of the line. "You kissed someone else, man. It wasn't planned. She came over about the venture fund." "I was distracted." "Celine saw you," Nolan said bluntly. "You messed up. You don't get to fix it with a dinner and a dozen apologies. I offered therapy. Too late." Brennan sat on the arm of the leather chair in his study, staring at the fireplace he hadn't used since winter. "I can't lose her." "Then maybe," Nolan said, "you should have thought about that before you put your hands on someone else." Celine spent that Sunday with Janessa and their lead program coordinator, prepping the final presentation for Haven House. They were 1 week out from breaking ground, and the mayor's office had sent a letter confirming attendance. Celine had also been asked to speak, not just about the initiative, but about her personal journey as a founder. Janessa looked over at her during the prep session. "You okay with that?" she asked. Celine nodded. I have more to say now." She didn't mean to, but her pain had reshaped her voice. What was once polite, filtered advocacy was now sharpened by truth. She wasn't just building a shelter. She was building proof that women rebuild, even after the world tries to undo them. That night, as the final slide deck exported, she received a text from an unknown number. "You left me, but I can't leave this alone. I'm sorry." No name, no plea. Just a short message that Brennan thought might pass as humble. Celine read it, deleted it, then unblocked his number long enough to send one message back. "Celine, you didn't lose me because you kissed someone. You lost me because when I was drowning in loneliness, I waited for you to notice, and you never did." She blocked him again. Monday morning, Brennan showed up at her office building. Security called up to her floor. She told them to escort him out, but instead of leaving quietly, Brennan made a mistake. He raised his voice. Someone filmed him pacing by the reception desk, demanding to speak with her, frustrated that he couldn't just get 5 minutes. The video landed on Instagram stories, then Twitter. "Is this Brennan Dax yelling at the Women's Resilience Collective?" The comments weren't kind. "Men like this are calm until you say no." Imagine being mad that she won't take you back while standing in the lobby of a domestic advocacy org. Embarrassing. By noon, the clip had made its way to their mutual contacts in political and philanthropic circles. One of the Civic Futures Fund board members texted Celine directly, "We support you. Just say the word if you want a public statement." She declined. She didn't need anyone to defend her. Brennan had already done the damage. He just didn't know how visible it was yet. By Wednesday, Brennan's name was quietly removed from a real estate development newsletter featuring joint ventures in Atlanta's South Side. The write-up included Celine's non-profit and a list of financial partners, but not his. His assistant pulled him aside. "I'm getting calls," she said. "They're asking if you're okay, if you're stepping back." He stared at her. Stepping back from what? The fund, the partnership, the Civic Futures seat. Brennan walked into his office and shut the door. No one had called him to ask. They had just moved on. Celine hadn't needed to say a word. Her absence was louder than any accusation, and the city noticed. That night, Celine sat in her hotel room, scanning over final press notes and grant documents. Her phone buzzed with a call. Janessa again. "I just had a wild idea," she said. "How would you feel about changing the name of Haven House?" Celine tilted her head. "To what?" "Ward Haven." Celine laughed. "You're serious? It's your blueprint, your fight, your journey. You walked through fire and still built something that shelters other women." Celine paused, then smiled. "Let's do it." Friday came faster than Celine expected. While the city buzzed in anticipation of the Ward Haven groundbreaking, Brennan was watching the media coverage from his penthouse, jaw clenched. His name wasn't in any of the press releases. He wasn't listed among the donors. His firm, Dax Capital, wasn't mentioned once, not even in the footnotes. He tried to tell himself it was nothing, that she'd come around, that she just needed space. But deep down, he knew this wasn't space. This was removal. and it was surgical. Meanwhile, Celine stood in her old living room, now the temporary operations base for her non-profits field team. Janessa sat on the arm of the couch, typing rapidly on her laptop. "News crews want to interview you post-ceremony," she said. 3 outlets, including Atlanta Life Weekly. "You want that?" Celine glanced up from her stack of prep notes. "I'll do one, but it's not about me." Janessa tilted her head. "They're gonna ask." Celine nodded slowly. "Then I'll give them what matters." She walked over to the corner table and picked up a folder labeled Testimonies, Confidential. Inside were letters written by women who had already pre-registered for the housing program, survivors of financial abuse, mothers who fled in the middle of the night, women who had worked 2 jobs but never felt safe sleeping in their own homes. Their words held weight, and Celine knew hers would need to match. By afternoon, the event space had been staged. Banners reading Ward Haven, a home for restarts, stood tall behind the podium. Rows of folding chairs lined the lawn. Camera crews set up near the walkways. Staff passed out welcome cards and bottled water. The scent of lavender drifted from the gift bags placed on each seat. Celine stood behind a closed door, staring at her reflection one last time. Cream blazer, fitted pants, curled hair pinned at the side. Not perfect, just anchored. Janessa stepped in. "You ready?" Celine nodded. Janessa lowered her voice. "I heard he's coming." Celine looked up. "Who told you?" One of the funders spotted him outside the lot, talking to someone from a tech incubator. Celine exhaled. "Let him." "You sure?" She nodded again. "He can watch, but he doesn't get to stand beside me." The event began. Applause welcomed her to the podium. The crowd fell silent. Celine cleared her throat. Her hands were steady. 3 years ago, she began. "I stood in front of a room like this and talked about what it meant to build with purpose. What I didn't realize then was that sometimes life will ask you to build while broken." She paused, letting the words settle. "I used to believe that love meant silence, that protecting someone else's image was part of being loyal. I was wrong." Cameras clicked. The wind shifted slightly. Her voice didn't waver. "Ward Haven isn't just a building, it's a choice, a declaration. For every woman who stayed longer than she should have, for every woman who kept quiet while being overlooked, undervalued, or betrayed." She looked directly into the crowd. She didn't have to search. She knew he was there. In a world where roses sometimes come with thorns sharper than words, "I want to say clearly, you are not required to bleed for someone else's comfort." Applause. Some clapped softly, some stood, but all felt the weight of it. Brennan was halfway back in the crowd, behind a local news van. He'd worn sunglasses, a charcoal suit, pressed, elegant, detached, but his heart was thudding in his chest. She didn't name him. She didn't have to. He looked around and realized. People knew. They were looking at him sideways, whispering, not directly, not with words, but enough. He turned and walked away before the program ended, not because he wanted to, but because this time she had the mic, and he had no defense. After the ceremony, reporters approached Celine. One asked gently, "What would you say to women who stayed silent for too long?" Celine looked at her with tired eyes, but a strong voice. "I would say, you're not weak. You were just loyal to the wrong version of love. But when you leave, make sure you don't just walk away. Build something behind you. Leave proof that you survived." Later that night, Mail Carter sat across from her at a small post-event dinner with close staff and supporters. He didn't bring flowers. He brought silence, the kind that felt like space, not absence. "You held yourself with so much grace up there," he said quietly. "I almost didn't," Celine replied. "I wanted to curse him out, call him out by name. But you didn't," Mail said. She shrugged. "Not because I'm noble. I just realized. He's not worth the spotlight." Mail offered a soft smile. Celine looked at him. "You stayed until the end." "I always do." That night, as she took off her heels and finally exhaled, Celine received an email from her lawyer. Subject: Dax Capital Partnership withdrawal confirmed body, all contracts. With Dax Capital and Civic Futures have been severed without breach. Final statements attached. Attached, as promised, was a PDF showing Brennan's name struck from all remaining ventures. No fuss, no court, just silence. Signed, sealed, closed. Have you ever walked away from someone who thought you never would? Have you ever found your strength in the silence after betrayal? If this part of Celine's journey spoke to you, drop a comment below. Share the moment that hit hardest. Hit like to support stories that speak truth. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories, because in the next chapter, Celine won't just survive. She's about to rise. We'll see you there. 3 days after the Ward Haven ceremony, Celine found herself sitting alone on the back porch of her non-profit's office, a quiet, shaded space that overlooked the midtown skyline. The city buzzed just beyond the trees, but here, all she could hear were birds, rustling leaves, and the occasional passing car. She wrapped her hands around a ceramic mug of ginger tea, the steam curling toward her face. The media had quieted down. The texts had slowed. Her staff had taken the rest of the week off. But her thoughts, still loud, still unresolved, because even as Brennan was removed from deals, blacklisted from panels, and gradually made invisible, in the spaces that once crowned him, Celine's chest still carried one lingering weight. When exactly had he stopped choosing her? The question haunted her, not out of longing, but out of the need for truth. She wasn't grieving the man. She was grieving the disconnection, the slow decay, the way things faded before she even knew to call it abandonment. That was the wound, not the woman. Not the kiss, the unspoken neglect. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes, letting the late morning breeze press against her skin. Then her phone buzzed. A name popped up she hadn't seen in months. Annalise Brewster, a woman she and Brennan had once mentored together, a rising black founder with a line of organic wellness products. Celine hesitated, then answered, "Annalise." "Oh my God, Celine. I didn't think you'd pick up." Her voice was cautious. "I wasn't avoiding you," Celine said gently. "Just sorting a few things. I saw everything. I didn't want to pry." A pause. "But I also didn't want to be silent. Brennan reached out to me." Celine didn't flinch. "When?" "Yesterday. Tried to pitch me on a side partnership. Said he's starting fresh. I told him I wasn't interested." "Thank you," Celine said quietly. "He asked if I knew what happened. I told him I didn't need to." Celine smiled faintly. "You didn't?" After the call, Celine scrolled back through old photos. Vacations, laughing selfies at the lake house, smiles that in hindsight looked stiff around the edges. And one image stuck. Her standing on their anniversary trip in Aspen, holding a glass of wine, eyes glazed as Brennan stared into his phone on the other side of the dinner table. That had been the turning point. She just hadn't known it yet. Later that afternoon, Celine stopped by the construction lot again. Ward Haven's foundation had been poured. Workers were framing walls, the rhythm of hammers echoing across the open ground. She stepped over caution tape and nodded to the site manager. "Mail's inside," he said, pointing toward the far corner. She found him kneeling in one of the rooms to be, marking up some temporary drywall with pencil notes. He wore boots, jeans, and a white t-shirt. No suit, no pretense, just presence. "Hey," she said softly. He stood and wiped his hands. "Didn't expect you. I needed quiet. I knew this was the place." He smiled. "Then it's yours." They walked slowly along the inside perimeter, stepping over scattered tools and stacks of lumber. Celine paused near a space marked community room. "This wall," she said. "I want it open. More light, more movement." Mael nodded. "Consider it done." She looked at him. "Do you ever feel like rebuilding is harder when the damage was quiet?" He looked back at her. "Yes, because you can't point to a single moment, just slow erosion. And that's harder to grieve." Celine blinked. "That's exactly it." He offered nothing more than understanding. No advice, no offer to fix, just reflection. It was enough. That evening, back at the hotel, Celine opened her journal, not to write about Brennan, but to write about herself, for the first time in a long time. I'm tired of being graceful about things that broke me, tired of being quiet so others can feel strong. I don't want revenge. I want to be seen for what I survived, without having to perform the pain. The next morning, her lawyer called. Just a heads up, Kendra said. He's contesting the infidelity clause. Celine rubbed her temple. Of course he is. He claims there was no physical act. There was a kiss. I told him that still counts, especially given your direct statement and witness proximity. Celine inhaled. Does it delay anything? No. We'll push through. I just wanted you to hear it from me. Celine smiled bitterly. Tell him he can fight for his image. I'm too busy building something real. 3 days later, Celine sat in the green room of a local TV studio. She hadn't planned to do press again so soon after the Ward Haven opening, but the station's producer was a black woman who had specifically requested her for a new segment on women in leadership. It's not about your marriage, the producer had said. It's about what you've done in the middle of all this. That word stuck. Middle. Not after, not before. In the middle of pain, Celine was still building, still leading, still showing up. Janessa sat beside her as makeup was lightly dabbed onto her cheeks. You look calm, Janessa said, sipping a bottle of water. I am, Celine replied. For once, I don't feel like I'm performing. Even better reason to speak. Celine glanced toward the screen behind the curtain. It showed a delayed feed of the current segment, a politician giving a tight-lipped soundbite. Do I talk about him if they ask? You talk about you, Janessa said. That's the story. The stage manager called her name. Celine stood, adjusted her jacket, and walked out into the bright lights. The host greeted her with a warm handshake and smile. Celine Ward, founder of the Women's Resilience Collective and the force behind Ward Haven. Thank you for being here. Celine smiled softly. Thank you for making space. You've been in the spotlight a lot lately, the host continued. But before the headlines, before the launch, who was Celine? Celine paused. The room was still. Her mic was live. And for the first time in public, she allowed honesty to take center stage. I was a woman trying to be invisible in her own life, she said. The host blinked. What do you mean? I thought love meant patience, silence, flexibility. But I was slowly shrinking, my voice, my wants, my peace, until one moment made everything I'd buried undeniable. The host didn't interrupt. The camera crew leaned in. I came home early, saw something I wasn't supposed to see. And in that moment, I saw myself. Not the wife, not the supporter. Me. The woman I hadn't spoken to in years. Backstage, Brennan sat watching the live stream from his tablet. Alone in his condo. No assistant. No noise. Just her voice. She hadn't said his name. But she didn't need to. The city already knew. More importantly, he knew. Every line cut deeper. Not because it was vicious. Because it was true. Back on set, the host leaned forward. How did you find the strength to walk away? I stopped needing an apology to move on, Celine answered. A pause. Then quiet applause from the small studio audience. Celine looked into the camera. To any woman watching this who's still questioning what she saw, what she felt, what she knows in her bones, let me tell you, it wasn't your fault, and you're not the one who broke it. Later that evening, Janessa met Celine for dinner. They sat at their usual spot, an outdoor garden cafe in Inman Park. I know I said no media, Celine said, but I'm glad I did that one. You weren't performing, Janessa said. You were testifying. Celine laughed. I sounded like a preacher. You sounded like someone who healed. Meanwhile, Brennan sat across from his PR manager and lawyer. You're toxic right now, the PR rep said bluntly. You can't go near anything affiliated with her. Not even indirectly. Brennan stared. That's my reputation she's ruining. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. She didn't say your name. She didn't have to. Then maybe. the PR rep said coldly. You should have kept your lips to yourself. Brennan stood, scoffed, and walked out of the meeting room. But the truth followed him, everywhere. The next day, Mel Carter dropped by the Ward Haven site again. Celine had asked him to review a new blueprint. The atrium needed structural adjustment for safety. He wore the same quiet energy she'd come to appreciate. No chasing. No pressure. Just present. After the walk through, they stood near the main entrance. Did you see the segment? She asked. I did. You think I said too much? I think you said what you needed to say, and it helped more people than you'll ever know. Celine looked away, then back at him. Why are you so gentle? Mel smiled. Because life already knows how to be cruel. I don't need to add to that. Her eyes welled unexpectedly. She blinked fast. He noticed, said nothing, but he didn't look away. He stood there, with her, not above her, not ahead of her. And she realized this was the first time in years she felt safe standing still next to a man. That night, she wrote again in her journal. He built an empire but couldn't protect my heart. He had roses but no roots. I was never asking for everything. Just presence. And I won't apologize for leaving when it was clear he gave that to someone else. The headlines didn't say his name, but they didn't have to. Founder's speech at Women's Center, opening sparks citywide response. Grace under fire, Celine Ward's quiet rebuild inspires movement. No names, just power. Atlanta listens. Brennan read each one. Alone, at his kitchen counter, scrolling with a thumb that shook more than he'd admit. He wanted to be angry, but all he could feel was the weight of being excluded. There was no message from Celine, no call, not even a forwarded article. Her silence wasn't passive anymore. It was strategic. She hadn't just walked away. She'd erased his influence from her world, cleanly, efficiently, without revenge. That kind of silence. It echoed. Across town, Celine sat in her shared workspace reviewing Ward Haven's next phase documents. She didn't flinch at headlines. She didn't double-check her name. She was working, focused, free, clear. A staff member knocked gently. There's someone here for you. No appointment. Celine glanced up. Who is it? He says his name is Brennan. She stared for a beat. Tell him I'm unavailable. The assistant paused. He's waiting outside. Celine stood, walked to the glass doors. There he was, outside the building. Suit perfectly tailored, face unreadable. But she felt nothing. Not rage, not heartbreak, just finality. She walked outside, no emotion in her voice. You don't get to keep showing up. I don't want to fight, he said. Then don't. He stepped forward. You won. I get it. Everyone loves you now. Celine's face didn't change. This wasn't a contest, Brennan. I wasn't trying to win. His jaw tightened. You humiliated me. No, she replied calmly. You did that. I just chose not to clean it up for you. He looked like he'd been slapped. I lost my place on the fund, he said. 2 major clients backed out of my firm. I'm not responsible for your consequences. He stared at her. You were everything to me. No, she said. I was available to you. There's a difference. He took another step. She didn't move. I miss us. She held his gaze. Then maybe you should have shown up while we still existed. She turned and walked inside. And Brennan, once the man who had everything, stood on the sidewalk, watched the door close, and realized he was no longer part of her narrative. That evening, Celine met Mel again. This time not at the worksite, but at a local black-owned bookstore hosting a panel on restorative spaces for women. She hadn't expected him to come, but when she arrived, there he was, seated in the back row, not claiming space, not asking for attention. After the panel, he helped stack the chairs. You always show up, she said, setting her bag down. I believe in what you're building. She smiled. You believe in a lot of things quietly. Some of the best things start quiet. He looked at her, not with want, but with warmth. I didn't know people like you existed, she said softly. I didn't know people like you would trust again. he replied. Celine felt a slow, unfamiliar peace settle in her chest. Back home, Brennan stared at his reflection in the mirror. Unshaven, tired. The man he used to be, the one who had answers, who owned the room, was gone. And in his place stood someone. Small. He picked up his phone, opened her number, typed, "Brennan, I know I can't come back, but I'll regret what I did for the rest of my life." He hovered over the send button, then deleted the message. Because this time, he knew. Her peace wasn't his to disturb anymore. The following morning, Celine opened the curtains of her new apartment in Old Fourth Ward. Just a few blocks from the Beltline, surrounded by restored brick buildings and fresh murals. It wasn't as big as the estate she'd shared with Brennan, but it was hers. Every detail, every decision, every quiet inch, no whispers, no guessing games, no waiting up at night hoping someone chose her back. She placed a ceramic planter on the windowsill, a deep green pot filled with rosemary and basil. She wasn't trying to prove she'd moved on. She simply was. She stood in the morning light and breathed. A knock interrupted her silence. It was Janessa, coffee in one hand, croissants in the other. "Thought you might not be in the mood for grocery store eggs." Celine smiled. Always. They sat at the kitchen island, sunlight warming the counters as they ate in easy silence. "You good?" Janessa asked gently. Celine nodded. "I think I'm learning what that actually means." Janessa leaned in. "You're glowing different." Celine laughed. "It's the peace. I've been washing my face and minding my business." They clinked coffee mugs. Later that day, Celine visited the Ward Haven site again, not as the founder with a clipboard, but as someone walking into her own future. Drywall was up. Doors were being hung. The bones of the place were finally becoming visible. And Mail was there, as always, walking the perimeter, talking to the site lead, double-checking design flow against purpose. She watched him from a distance. No rush, no pressure. When he finally noticed her, he smiled. He didn't walk over immediately. He gave her space to arrive. When she did, he spoke first. "I took your idea for the meditation room and expanded it." "Oh." He handed her a sketch. Open floor. Skylight. Plants hanging from suspended beams. A curved bench along the wall with soft cushions. It felt like the kind of space where women could feel safe, not small. Celine blinked. "You think like someone who's had to rebuild." Maël looked down, then back at her. "I lost my sister 7 years ago. Domestic situation. We couldn't get to her in time." Celine's heart dropped. "I'm so sorry." He nodded. "She was the reason I got into design. Every room I build now. I try to make sure it's a place she would have felt strong enough to stay in." Celine swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "Thank you for trusting me with that. I don't share it often," he said, "but I know you'd protect it." Their eyes met. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was intimate, rooted in grief, bound by purpose. That evening, Celine sat on her balcony and journaled again. "He thought I'd fall apart quietly, but peace doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. Peace is knowing I never have to beg for clarity again. I am not someone's option, I am someone's home. Even if it's my own." Elsewhere, Brennan sat in his office with his phone flipped upside down. His calendar was empty. His inbox had gone quiet, and he was slowly learning that reputation isn't bulletproof when built on silence and soft manipulation. The invitations had stopped. His name wasn't on the city's next roundtable panel. Investors were hesitant. He told himself it was temporary, but in his chest, he knew. This wasn't about one mistake. It was about the man he chose to be when no one was watching. And now everyone had seen him. Back on Celine's balcony, her phone buzzed. It was an email. Subject line, "Community Women's Health Project Collaboration Opportunity." The organization wanted to partner with Ward Haven for long-term mental wellness programming. Celine closed her laptop and smiled. This was the life she had built. No husband, no mansion, no performance. Just purpose, peace, and people who saw her for who she truly was. Monday morning started with quiet power. Celine stood before a group of 10 women, all future residents of Ward Haven. The space wasn't finished yet, but they were hosting their first orientation in the side office of a nearby community center. Each woman sat with a folder, a cup of coffee, and the look of someone who'd seen too much, and yet still showed up. Celine didn't use a projector, no polished slides, just her story. "I'm not standing here because I got it all right," she said, voice even but firm. "I'm standing here because I stopped giving away the parts of me that no one was protecting." A few heads nodded. One woman wiped a tear quickly with her sleeve. "You'll have your own room, your own door, your own key. That doesn't just make you a resident, it makes you the owner of your next chapter." There was a pause, then quiet applause. No performance, just honest hands clapping in rhythm with their own stories. Janessa walked over afterward and whispered, "You didn't speak like a leader. You spoke like a survivor." Celine smiled. "Because I am." Later that afternoon, she met with Mail to go over the final structural adjustments. They stood outside the frame of what would soon be the wellness library. Sun spilling through open windows, sawdust swirling at their feet. He handed her a small sketchbook. "I've been documenting all the changes you made," he said. "Thought you should have the original copies." Celine flipped through the pages. Each room, each adjustment, noted in pencil and labeled SW in the margins. "You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. One day, this might be part of a story someone else tells." She ran her fingers over the paper. "Do you ever feel like this place is saving you too?" she asked. Mail paused. "Every day." Back in her apartment that evening, Celine lit a candle and sat cross-legged on the floor. The day had moved her more than she expected. The women, their faces, their guarded gratitude. She wasn't just building shelter. She was building proof that broken didn't mean finished. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her younger sister, Avi. "Avi," he emailed me. "Just wanted you to know." Celine's stomach tightened. She hadn't spoken to Brennan's side of the family in weeks, and she'd told hers to keep boundaries up if he ever circled back. "Celine, thanks for letting me know. You okay?" "Avi, yeah. He's desperate." But I didn't reply. "He's not getting access to you through me." Celine smiled softly. She was surrounded by people who now understood. Peace is a boundary, not a bridge. The next day, Celine visited the site alone. No reporters, no staff, no mail. She walked slowly through the first finished hallway, where paint had finally dried. Her heels clicked against clean tile. She paused inside one of the completed rooms. The sunlight came in through a wide window. A wooden bed frame was built in. There was a desk by the wall, a mirror across from the closet. She sat on the edge of the bed and cried, not the kind of cry that begged to be comforted, the kind that made room for everything that had been locked away. Tears for the version of her who waited for someone to come home. Tears for the woman who was always understanding. Tears for the future she now claimed entirely for herself. Outside, she heard footsteps. She wiped her face quickly. Mail stood at the doorway, not stepping in. "You okay?" She nodded, then stood, just processing. He didn't offer to hug her, didn't rush the moment, didn't retreat either. He just said, "I'll be here." And somehow, that was everything she needed. That evening, as the sun set, Celine cooked dinner in her small kitchen, garlic, lentils, and roasted vegetables. She turned on soft jazz and poured a glass of red wine. Not to escape, to celebrate. She'd survived something most people would never see coming, not just the betrayal, but the slow erosion of self-worth that comes from being in a house where love is rationed out like favors. Tonight, she ate alone, and it didn't feel lonely. It felt like restoration. The following morning, the sun broke early through the wide kitchen windows of Celine's apartment, casting amber streaks across her countertop. She was barefoot, sipping hot lemon water, still in her robe and at peace. Today was hers. No agenda, no calls to return, no headlines to brace for. But even peace has layers. And this morning, she felt one peeling back. She walked over to her writing desk and opened her journal. Her fingers hovered for a second, then moved. What I thought was love was convenience. A man who liked the version of me that made his life easier. But now, I know. If I have to shrink for you to feel big, it's not love. It's ego. And I don't feed egos anymore. Around noon, Mail texted, "Mail, passing through the site today if you want to see the meditation room walls go up." Celine hesitated. Not because she didn't want to see it, but because she did. And that was still something she was learning to trust. Celine, on my way. By the time she arrived, the crew had already installed the main arch. Smooth. Open. Soft curves instead of hard corners. It reminded her of a sanctuary, not a facility. Mail stood to the side, arms crossed, watching the work with quiet satisfaction. She stepped beside him. "You built this from what I described, from what you felt." She looked around, hands folded in front of her. "I've never seen safety take shape like this. Most people don't until they stop settling for survival," he replied. She glanced over at him. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was offering insight, gently, humbly. After the crew left, Celine remained in the space. Mail stayed too, sitting quietly on the ledge by the window. No rush, no filler. She walked toward the center of the room and stood still. Then turned to face him. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why haven't you tried anything?" He tilted his head slightly. "You mean, you've been here, showing up, kind, intentional, but never pursuing." He thought for a moment, then stood and stepped closer, but not too close. "Because I don't want to be another man who sees you as a reflection of what he wants." She blinked. "I see you, the full woman, not just the healed version." Her throat tightened. "And because," he added, "you're still healing. And real love doesn't rush that." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you for not making me question if you had an angle. I only have one," he said gently. "Honor." That night, Celine returned home and did something she hadn't done in months. She opened the last text Brennan ever sent. Still sitting there, unread, unanswered. "Brennan, please don't let this be the end of us." She reread it once, then calmly tapped delete. No rage, no response, just release. 3 hours later, she found herself looking at her phone again. Not to revisit the past, but to create something new. She opened a new text, typed slowly, deliberately. "Celine, hey, thank you for today, and for letting the space be enough. Most people rush into rooms. You made this one feel sacred." She hit send. Mail replied a few minutes later. "Mail, some rooms were made for rebuilding. I'll always protect that." Later that night, Celine lit a single candle, curled under her soft throw blanket, and smiled to herself. This wasn't a new love story yet. It was something better. It was a woman writing her own story first, and learning, finally, that peace isn't the absence of pain. It's knowing you never have to prove your worth again. For the first time in a long while, Celine noticed how her laugh had changed. It wasn't sharp or practiced. It wasn't the polite chuckle she'd mastered for donors and social mixers. This one came from her belly. Unforced, unapologetic. She heard it escape as she leaned against the picnic table across from Mail, a small box of takeout between them, curry, noodles and lemongrass tofu from a local Thai food truck just outside the design studio he occasionally consulted with. Mail smiled at her across the table, his lips barely curled, but his eyes unmistakably lit. "You don't laugh like someone who's holding back," he said. She wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. "That's because I finally stopped performing." He nodded. "I've never liked shows." "Neither did I," she said. "But I got good at starring in one." They'd decided to meet outside the usual setting of Ward Haven today. No construction noise, no non-profit schedule, no clipboards or site maps. Just a wooden bench under a wide magnolia tree and a quiet meal shared between. Two people who no longer needed to explain why silence felt so good. Celine picked up a pair of napkins and handed him one. "So, tell me something I don't know about you." Mail leaned back. "All right, When I was 9, I used to steal plywood from my uncle's hardware yard just to build tree houses that no one asked for. She laughed again. You were ambitious early. I got in trouble a lot. But look at you now. Still building things nobody asks for. But this time, they need them more than they know. Mael's expression softened. And what about you? Something I wouldn't find in your press bio. Celine thought for a second. I talk to my basil plant like it's a person. Named her Livia. Mael's eyebrows lifted. Livia? She's dramatic. I feel judged when I forget to water her. I respect that. They both laughed again, and this time it settled into a comfortable pause, one that didn't beg to be filled. When they stood to leave, Mael opened the passenger door of her car before she could reach it. Celine paused. You don't have to do that, she said softly. I know, he replied. That's why I do it. That evening, Celine replayed the moment more than once. Not the door, the silence between them. It didn't feel empty. It felt intentional. A man who didn't need to fill space to be present. A man who wasn't trying to rush her forward just to move past where she'd been. She curled into her bed with her journal on her lap and wrote, What if softness isn't weakness? What if it's just love that doesn't make you bleed first? Meanwhile, Brennan scrolled through social media. He hadn't seen her in person since the last time she turned him away outside her office. But now, she was everywhere. Panels, podcasts, taglines beneath her name that read Resilience Advocate and founder of Ward Haven. He paused on a short video clip from a conference, Celine standing on stage, a blazer over her shoulders, her natural curls loose and full, her voice steady. You don't recover by returning to what hurt you. You recover by redefining what you deserve. Brennan clicked it off. He could feel the version of himself he'd worked so hard to protect, slipping away, because now no one looked at him and saw value. They looked at her and saw purpose. The next morning, Celine woke to a knock on her door. It was early. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened it cautiously, robe tied tight, slippers still on. It was Mael, holding a tiny pot of basil. She looked lonely, he said, handing it to her. Thought Livia might need a sister. Celine laughed. You name her? Of course. That's Ophelia. She stepped aside. You want coffee? Only if it comes with more of that laugh. They sat at her kitchen table, 2 mugs steaming between them, light pouring through the window. It didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like a continuation of something already safe, already forming. I wasn't expecting company, she said. I wasn't expecting to be company, he replied. She smiled down at her cup. I like that you show up without warning. And still bring peace? He asked. Exactly. Before he left, he stood by the door with one hand on the frame. Take your time, Celine, he said. I'm not in a hurry. She didn't respond right away. Then finally, quietly, she replied, That's the only reason I don't feel afraid. 2 nights later, Celine stood in front of her full-length mirror, holding up a burgundy wrap dress she hadn't worn in years. Not because it was too formal or too tight, but because she didn't remember what it felt like to get dressed for herself. No one was waiting for her in a restaurant. There was no business event, no gala, no panel, just Mael. He'd invited her to a quiet jazz lounge tucked away in Sweet Auburn. Small stage, dim lights, live upright bass. His text had been simple. Mael, if you're free, I know a place where the music won't ask questions. She didn't need time to think. She wanted to go. But as she tied the sash of the dress and stepped into her heels, she noticed something different. This wasn't a performance. It was permission. The lounge smelled like warm oak and slow comfort. The band played without rush, without show. They weren't trying to impress anyone. They were just telling the truth, with brass and breath. Mael was already there when she walked in. He stood when he saw her, expression soft but still. He didn't say, "You look beautiful." He didn't need to. He saw her, and Celine felt seen. They ordered small plates and ginger spritzes, talked about everything but the past. Travel, books, design. What made people feel at home in a world that often made them feel like guests? She leaned forward. I never knew love could sound like silence and feel like breath. He tilted his head. Then what did it used to feel like? Celine paused. Obligation. Performance. Being small enough to fit inside someone else's image of me. Mael's eyes held hers. And now, I don't shrink anymore. He didn't nod. He didn't affirm her out loud. He just smiled, because he'd already seen that in her. Later, they stepped outside into the quiet night. Celine leaned against her car. He stood beside her. The breeze was warm. The silence was full. "You want to come up?" she asked, surprising herself. Mael didn't flinch. "Only if you want that." She looked at him, steady. "I do. But only as far as the kitchen." "You're not an answer to anything. I just want more of this." He nodded. "I don't need to be the destination," he said. "I'm just grateful to be in the room." They climbed the stairs together. Celine unlocked her door and motioned him in. The space was dim and calm. Candles on the kitchen counter. A record player humming in the corner. Mael took a seat at the bar while she poured tea. Chamomile and clove. "I didn't know peace could smell like this," he said. She slid the mug toward him. "I didn't know peace could visit and not demand anything in return." They drank slowly, quietly. Then Celine sat across from him, bare feet curled under her, robe draped across her lap. "I was afraid," she admitted, "that I wouldn't recognize safety if it came dressed in quiet." "And now?" he asked. "Now I know. Safety isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up. It stays. And it never asks you to shrink." They sat like that for hours. No pressure. No kiss. No hurry. When Mael stood to leave, he reached for her hand gently. "Thank you for letting me come inside the quiet." Celine held his hand for a moment longer. "Thank you for not mistaking stillness for weakness." As the door clicked shut behind him, she didn't feel absence. She felt grounded, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Have you ever experienced a kind of love that didn't rush you, just held space for you to be? Have you ever had to relearn what safety feels like? If this chapter touched something quiet in you, share your thoughts below. What was your favorite moment from Celine and Mael's unfolding connection? Tap like to keep this story alive. Subscribe if you're ready to see what healing actually looks like. Because in the next chapter, Celine doesn't just grow, she blooms. Celine had never known a Saturday like this. No pressure to host, no social obligation to perform. Just sunlight, her bare shoulders, a playlist humming somewhere in the background. And Mael in her kitchen chopping ginger like he'd done it 1,000 times. He'd shown up late morning, a brown paper bag in hand. "Everything for that lemongrass broth you told me about," he said. "You weren't bluffing, right?" She grinned. "I never bluff about food." And now, hours later, they moved around each other like rhythm and counterpoint. He stirred. She peeled. He set the table. She lit the candles. No script, no tension, just flow. They ate on the balcony, the breeze soft, the sun slipping past the horizon in slow gold ribbons. Mael took a bite, paused, then looked at her. "You really made this broth by feel?" "Every time," Celine replied. "No measurements, just memory." He nodded slowly. "That's what this feels like." She tilted her head. "What does?" "This, being here. It doesn't feel rehearsed. It feels remembered, like something familiar, but finally safe." Celine swallowed gently, her chest warm for reasons that had nothing to do with the soup. "I think I'm remembering too," she said. "Who I was before someone needed me small." They talked for another hour, not about Brennan, not about pain, but about joy, the little things. Celine told him she once took flamenco classes for 2 weeks and quit because she hated the shoes. He told her he used to write short poems on scrap wood and leave them at job sites. They both laughed when she dared him to do it again. At one point, the wind carried a loose curl across her cheek. Mael reached out gently, eyes asking before fingers moved. She didn't pull away. He tucked the curl behind her ear, his fingertips lingering just long enough to remind her. She was allowed to feel this. Soft, seen, wanted, without performance, without pressure. Later, as he helped clean up, she caught herself watching him, shirt sleeves rolled, hands rinsing dishes with ease. She remembered the way Brennan used to pay someone to do this, the way he performed romance in front of friends, then turned cold when the house was empty. This, Mael's presence, wasn't a replacement. It was a return to the parts of her that once believed gentleness could last. After the kitchen was spotless, they stood in the doorway. "Same time next week?" he asked. Celine leaned against the frame. "You planning to bring ingredients or poetry?" He smirked. "Maybe both." She grinned. Then yes. He stepped closer, not into her space, but close enough for clarity. "I meant what I said before," he added. "Take your time." Her eyes searched his face. "I don't think I need much more time to know. This is good." Mael's smile didn't widen. It softened. "Good is enough," he said. And with that, he left. No kiss, no pressure, just the kind of goodbye that left you looking forward to more. That night, Celine wrote in her journal, "For once, I'm not asking what this means. I'm asking how it feels. And right now, it feels like peace that stayed for dinner and didn't need to be fed to stay." Across town, Brennan sat in his living room staring at an untouched drink. He hadn't heard from Celine in weeks. Not directly, not even through mutual contacts, but he'd seen the video of her recent talk. He noticed Mael in the background, subtle, quiet, always near. His chest burned, not because Celine had moved on, but because she'd grown without him. And somehow, that made him feel smaller than he'd ever been. Back in her apartment, Celine stood on her balcony, arms folded, face tilted toward the sky. There were no tears, no ache, only the gentle realization she didn't need someone to come save her. She'd already built the place she could finally be safe. The next morning, Celine woke up early. There was no alarm, no meeting, just sunlight across her pillow and the subtle hum of peace in her chest. She made tea barefoot, scrolling through her emails with one hand while jazz played quietly from the kitchen speaker. Most of her messages were event confirmations, press requests, and donation follow-ups. She skimmed, replied to a few, deleted the rest, then paused at the one subject line that sat stubbornly at the top of her inbox. From Brennan. She didn't open it, not right away. Instead, she picked up her mug and walked onto her balcony, breathing in the crisp air, watching the morning, feeling the stillness she'd fought to earn. When she finally returned inside, she clicked the message. From Brennan Dack's subject. "I never thought I'd lose you like this, Celine. I've watched you on every stage. I've seen you become the woman I always knew you were capable of being. But I never imagined I wouldn't be allowed to stand beside you. I made a mistake. But I'm not a monster. You know me better than anyone. And I still believe we were good together. I miss you. I miss us. Please, let's talk. One last time. You deserve that much." B. Celine stared at the screen for a full minute. Then she closed her laptop. Because she wasn't going back to conversations that only served the ego of the person who'd hurt her. An hour later, she was back at the Ward Haven site, walking the freshly painted second-floor hallway with Janessa and two new team leads. The space felt different now. Not just because the construction was nearly done, but because Celine had stopped shrinking inside it. One of the leads asked, "When are we opening the applications officially?" Celine smiled. "Next month. I want every room to be filled by women who are choosing more, not settling for less." Janessa nudged her. "That includes you too, you know." "I'm already full," Celine said, her smile soft. That evening, Mael stopped by. He didn't bring food. He didn't need to. Celine was already simmering lentils on the stove, barefoot, hair tied up, music playing low. He leaned in the doorway and watched her stir. "You always cook like it's meditation," he said. She turned, smiling, "Because it is." After dinner they sat on the couch, not facing each other, but angled, comfortable, close. "I got an email from him," she said suddenly. Mael didn't tense. He didn't ask which him. He just nodded once. You okay? I didn't respond. He exhaled, slow. That's a response. She looked over at him. You never ask me to explain myself. You already do that with the whole world, he replied. I'm just here to make sure you don't have to perform in your own home. Celine felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the food. You're a good man, she said. Mael smiled. I'm trying to be better than I was yesterday. She reached out, hand resting on his. I think we're both doing that. Later, as the sky deepened and the room darkened around them, she leaned her head onto his shoulder. No words, no escalation, just closeness. She hadn't allowed herself this kind of comfort in years. Not without guilt, not without fear. But this was earned. That night, Brennan sat alone on his terrace, sipping whiskey that no longer warmed him. The email remained unanswered. He refreshed his inbox 3 times before finally shutting his laptop. She wasn't coming back, and no one around him looked at him the same. He picked up his phone, typed a text. Brennan, I still love you. He stared at it, then backspaced every letter. Because love isn't control. And Celine no longer belonged in his orbit. She'd become too whole to orbit anyone else's gravity but her own. Back in her bed, Celine whispered to herself before drifting to sleep. I am no longer someone's memory. I am someone's present. 2 weeks later, Celine stood at the front of the Ward Haven conference room, facing a crowd that had once whispered about her behind closed doors. But today, they weren't whispering. They were listening. Local reporters, board members, former donors, even skeptics who had doubted her when the scandal first broke. All were present for the unveiling of Ward Haven's official launch and its future expansion across the state. Celine wore navy. Not black, not beige, navy. Bold but composed. A color that stood for authority without aggression. She wasn't here to reclaim anything. She was here to own it. Janessa tapped her shoulder. You sure you're ready for this? Celine nodded. This moment isn't about me. It's about the women we're going to house, protect, and rebuild. Then she stepped up to the podium, and silence followed. Her voice was calm, measured. I was once a woman who knew how to survive, but I didn't know how to live. I let someone else define my worth, my silence, my identity. Until I learned something crucial, love without dignity isn't love. It's control. You could hear the air shift. Today, we open Ward Haven not just for women starting over, but for any woman who's been taught that starting over means shame. There is no shame in choosing peace. There is no shame in walking away. Someone in the back stood. It was an older woman. She clapped slowly. Then others followed. Soon the entire room was applauding. And yet, amidst the applause, Celine saw him, standing in the back. Brennan. He hadn't been invited, but there he was, in a grey suit that didn't shine the way it used to, standing as if the ground had shifted under his feet. Celine didn't flinch. She didn't pause. She kept going. People ask what we should do with men who abuse power. I say, hold them accountable. Not through vengeance, but through truth. Because the truth, when spoken fully, does not need to scream to be heard. Later, in the hallway, he approached her. Celine, he began, voice quiet, eyes searching. She didn't offer a hug, didn't soften. She just stood still. He swallowed. I didn't come here to make a scene. I came to say I'm sorry. I know what I did to you, how I broke your trust. I see now that I tried to own you, not love you. She stared at him, calm, grounded. You didn't love me, she said. You loved how I made you feel. That's not love. That's ego. Brennan's jaw tightened. I lost everything when you walked. Celine stepped closer. No. You lost everything when you didn't stop her. When you let a woman disrespect your partner in your own home. When you told me to be quiet. When you made me feel like I was asking for too much when all I wanted was to be safe. His eyes welled. I didn't know how to be a good man then. And I'm not the woman who would have waited for you to become one. With that, she turned away. But not out of anger, Not out of revenge, out of peace. Mael waited outside in his car. He didn't ask questions when she climbed in. Just passed her a bottle of water and drove. After a few minutes, Celine spoke. He said he was sorry. And Mael kept his eyes on the road. And I said thank you. Then I walked away. Mael nodded once. You okay? I think I am. That weekend, Wardhaven held a small dinner for the women in the pilot housing group. 5 women. 5 different journeys. But all had one thing in common. They were done apologizing for surviving. Celine sat among them, laughing, eating, feeling full in ways she hadn't in years. Brennan, meanwhile, issued a public statement days later. Not in a press conference, not with PR spin, but in a personal blog post that went viral. I lost a woman who could have built empires beside me. And I lost her because I chose image over integrity. He stepped down from his position at the firm. He donated the rest of his severance to Wardhaven, and then he disappeared from the press. Not because Celine demanded it, but because consequences finally did. By Sunday morning, Mael knocked gently on Celine's door. She was already up, notebook in hand, writing the next stages of the Wardhaven rollout. He leaned in the doorway, eyes warm. You look steady. She smiled. I am. Want to do something impulsive? She raised an eyebrow. Like what? He held up 2 plane tickets. There's a conference in Seattle next weekend, all about rebuilding trust after trauma. You speak. I'll support. Celine grinned. You booked this without asking me. He shrugged. I'm learning to take risks. She walked over, took the ticket and kissed his cheek. Then let's risk it. Celine hadn't expected to feel calm when the article dropped. The woman he should have chosen, inside Celine Ward's quiet rise after public betrayal. It was on the cover of the Journal Review, a national feature, not a scandal recap, not gossip. A full spread on her nonprofit's mission, her impact, and how she redefined what walking away looked like. Janessa had called her first. Girl, it's everywhere. Then, Mael. I read it twice. I'd read it again. You owned every line. Celine sat on the back porch of her apartment, morning tea in hand, sun warming her legs. But the biggest surprise? It wasn't the article. It was the voicemail from Brennan's mother. Celine, I don't expect you to respond, but I just want you to know. I'm sorry for the part I played, for not seeing you, for siding with him when I should have asked you what happened. I was wrong. You didn't deserve what you went through. Celine listened, quiet. She had once ached to hear words like that, to feel seen. Now, they didn't break her. They just reminded her of how far she'd come. At the same time, Brennan was being forced to reckon with more than guilt. His firm, once a leader in digital consulting, had issued a formal ethics review. They found no legal violation, but several lapses in internal conduct. The board quietly suggested he step down from all leadership roles for a year. He complied, not out of grace, but out of loss. And more than once, he found himself looking through Celine's interviews, watching her without her knowing. In every frame, she looked freer, brighter, unreachable, as she should be. 1 month later, Seattle. The conference hall buzzed with quiet energy. Trauma therapists, advocates, non-profit founders, all gathered for a keynote that had everyone leaning forward in their seats. Celine walked out in black jeans, a cream blouse, and no notes. She didn't need any. I'm not a therapist, she began. I'm not a doctor. I don't have degrees in healing. But I lived through silence, through betrayal, through being told I should be grateful I was chosen. She let that settle. And still, I almost chose to stay. Not because I was weak, but because I believed love meant endurance. People nodded. Some cried. I've learned since then that endurance is for marathons, not marriages. That the greatest form of self-respect is walking away when your peace starts to shrink. She told them about Wardhaven, about women who arrived with nothing but a bag and a heartbeat, about one woman who said, I didn't need a hero. I needed someone to stop pretending they didn't see me. The room was still, raw, and when she ended, she didn't bow. She stood there and let the applause wash over her like proof, not praise. Proof. Mail met her backstage. He didn't say great job. He didn't need to. He just wrapped her in an embrace. Steady, close. She whispered against his shoulder, "You think this is what healed looks like?" He kissed her hair. "No, I think this is what free looks like." Back in Georgia, Brennan now lived alone. No fiancé, no firm. He had started volunteering quietly at a men's accountability circle, teaching young professionals how to lead with character, not charm. It wasn't a redemption arc. It was the beginning of his work, and for the first time in years, he did it without needing to be seen. Meanwhile, Ward Haven had grown. 2 new houses opened in rural counties. Celine hired 3 full-time therapists, launched a scholarship program for single mothers, and on a quiet Sunday, she got a text from Janessa. "Thought you might like this." Attached was a picture from the downtown mural wall. It was a painting of Celine, hand-painted by a local artist. No crown, no cape, just her, holding a blueprint. And at the bottom, the words, "She built what tried to break her." Celine smiled. She didn't respond to the text. She just turned to Mail, who was cooking in her kitchen. "You know what I want?" she asked. He looked over. "Always. A day when no one asks me to be strong. Just loved." He wiped his hands, walked over, touched her cheek. "You got that day." He kissed her. Not to save her, just to hold her. Celine never thought comfort could be this quiet. Her mornings weren't filled with tension anymore. No wondering if she said the wrong thing, wore the wrong thing, looked too distracted or too independent. She just woke up. To sunlight, to her own breath, and, more often now, to Mail, barefoot in her kitchen, humming like he belonged there. Because by now, he did. They hadn't labeled anything. No official titles, no declarations, but there was rhythm in their days. He knew she liked chamomile before speaking. She knew he liked his eggs over medium and hated when people left cabinets open. And in that soft, unspoken way, they fit. But Celine still had questions, not about him, about herself. Do I know how to love without losing myself? She had asked Janessa during one of their walks. Janessa replied without hesitation. That's the only kind of love you should even consider from now on. That afternoon, Celine sat in her shared office at Ward Haven, reviewing applications for the new in-residence program. The non-profit had received a major grant from a women's collective, and she was building out a full-time recovery curriculum. Mail had offered to help, sitting across from her, legs stretched out, laptop open, reading through case profiles. "Yasmin Taylor," he said, squinting at one. "Single mother of 2. Fled from another state. Sounds like someone who needs this." Celine nodded, her hand pausing on her pen. "You get invested quickly," she said, watching him. He looked up. "You don't?" "I do, but I've learned to put boundaries on my empathy. It nearly swallowed me whole once." Mail leaned forward, voice low. "I get that. But maybe the point isn't to avoid being swallowed. Maybe it's to know how to breathe while you're deep in it." She stared at him. Something in her chest shifted. Later that night, after a quiet dinner at her place, Celine reached for a wine glass, then paused. "Mail." "Yeah?" She turned to him. "Serious. Why haven't you asked for more?" He didn't flinch. More. A label, a relationship, definitions, expectations. He set down his fork. "Because I don't need to own your healing to feel close to you. You've given me enough." That hit her harder than she expected, because every other man before him had made her feel like loving her was a favor, like patience was a transaction, like healing had a deadline. But Mail, he saw her. He didn't push. He waited, not out of weakness, but out of respect. Later that week, she invited him to join her at a fundraiser dinner for a local shelter. It was the first public event they'd attended together. They walked in side by side, not holding hands, but their closeness said everything, and people noticed. 2 women whispered. A former donor from Brennan's firm glanced, then blinked in surprise. but no one mattered except the man beside her. Mail held doors. He listened during speeches. He introduced himself not as her man or date, but as someone who believed in her mission. Celine watched him, heart full. No performance, no dominance, just quiet strength. And for the first time in a long time, she wondered. After the event, as they walked to her car, he opened the passenger side, then paused. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. More than okay. He studied her, but still holding back. She didn't deny it. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you, of what I could lose if I stopped protecting myself." Mael stepped closer. "You're not weak if you take a chance," he said. "You're brave because you survived and still want to try again." Her voice was small. "How do you know I won't get hurt again?" He didn't promise safety. He promised this. "Because if you ever feel hurt with me, you'll be able to say it, out loud. And I'll stay and listen." She broke, right there in the parking lot, but not from pain, from relief. And when he leaned in, not for a kiss, but just to rest his forehead against hers, she didn't flinch. She leaned back. They didn't rush anything that night. No dramatic scenes, no passion-fueled decisions. Just two people sitting in her living room afterward, quietly sharing space, laughing over childhood stories, watching a nature documentary with their legs brushing. It felt normal. But to Celine, it felt miraculous, because this time, love didn't start with fireworks. It started with safety, and that's what made her want to give it everything. Mael didn't ask to stay the night, but Celine offered. Not out of obligation, not out of loneliness, but because she wanted him there, near, present. So, when he moved through her hallway, his steps soft, the moment quiet, Celine felt no panic, no dread, just warmth. She changed into her robe, hair pulled into a loose bun, and walked into the living room where he sat. "Pillow and blanket for the couch?" she asked, half smiling. He met her gaze. "Only if that's where you want me." Her silence was answer enough. In her bedroom, the air was still. She turned off the overhead light, but left a lamp on. She wasn't used to sharing space, not intimately. But Mael didn't push. He stood a little distance away as she pulled back the comforter. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded. Her robe slipped slightly at the collar, revealing the delicate edge of her shoulder. He noticed, but he didn't pounce. Instead, he stepped closer, slowly, watching her expression. "Celine," he said, voice steady, "I won't take anything you're not ready to give." That did something to her. She exhaled and walked to him. "I want this," she said, fingers grazing his shirt. "But I need to move slow. I need to be sure I'm doing it for me, not to feel wanted, not to fill a space someone else hollowed out." He cupped her cheek gently. "Then slow is what we'll be." They lay down together, fully clothed, side by side, breathing in sync. Celine rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. That sound alone quieted every voice that ever told her she wasn't enough. The next morning, Mael woke up first. He watched her sleep, peaceful, unguarded, then quietly slipped out of bed, made coffee, and started breakfast. The simple kind. Toast, eggs, berries on the side. When Celine entered the kitchen in her robe, barefoot, she blinked at the sight. "You made breakfast? Don't most people eat in the morning?" He grinned. She narrowed her eyes playfully. "Don't most men wait to be served?" He raised an eyebrow. "I'm not most men." She smiled, and her smile wasn't small. That morning became their new rhythm. They started spending more evenings together. Quiet dinners, long drives, game nights at Janessa's, where her friend shamelessly grilled Mael on every part of his past. He answered every question, calm, open, real. And when Janessa finally leaned back and nodded in approval, Celine felt something melt inside her. But not everything was perfect. Because one afternoon, Celine received a letter from Brennan's attorney. It was a property settlement request. Apparently, he'd finally decided to sign over the house, but only if she released a final joint asset they'd never discussed. The last investment fund they built together. He wanted her to forfeit it. Celine sat at her desk for an hour, staring at the paper. Mail walked in and saw the tension in her shoulders. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat down beside her. "Is it from him?" he asked. She nodded. "Do you want to talk about it?" She shook her head. "Okay," he said, "but when you do, I'll be here." That night, she finally opened up. "Part of me wants to take the deal," she admitted. "Just be done with it. Start fresh. No more delays." Mail didn't tell her what to do. He just asked, and would that feel like freedom or surrender? She went quiet, because the truth was, Brennan still thought he could name the terms of her peace. And that burned. A week later, she rejected the offer, and countered, with full receipts, documentation, and a demand that Brennan release everything he owed her. Mail didn't celebrate or gloat. He simply pulled her into his arms and whispered, "You didn't bend. I'm proud of you." A few days later, Mail invited her to his place. It was a small but thoughtful space, warm lighting, art he'd collected during travels, a few plants he cared for obsessively. Celine laughed when she saw the salsa records. "You dance?" she asked, surprised. "Enough to embarrass myself," he said, "but I like the freedom of it." She picked up one of the vinyls. "Put it on." He hesitated. "Right now? Why not?" He smiled and slid the record into place. As the beat played, he reached for her hand. Celine followed his lead, uncertain at first, but gradually loosening, laughing, spinning into his arms. And then he held her close, closer than he ever had. There was no rush, no sudden shift into heat, just warmth, rhythm, eyes locked, breaths shared. Her fingers slipped around his neck. His hand steadied the curve of her back. He looked into her eyes, serious now. "May I kiss you?" Celine nodded, and the kiss that followed wasn't explosive. It was steady, sure, tender, and it said everything they hadn't yet put into words. Afterward, they sat on the couch, fingers still entwined. Celine leaned her head against his shoulder. "I feel safe with you," she said. Mail kissed her temple. "That's all I ever wanted." That night, as she drove home, Celine realized something. She didn't feel like someone moving on from pain. She felt like someone stepping into her next chapter, not because a man completed her, but because she chose herself first. And in doing so, she found someone who met her there. The fall fundraiser at the Literacy Center was packed. City council members, donors, former students and educators filled the decorated halls. A local jazz trio played softly in the background. Cameras flashed. Reporters interviewed the director at the front steps, but none of the buzz reached Celine. She stood near the book display table, wearing a tailored deep green dress with a soft slit up one side. Her natural curls framed her face, and her heels clicked softly as she moved between guests. Every step she took was measured, poised. Every word she spoke carried weight. She wasn't just attending. She was one of the night's honorees. Mail stood near the bar, watching her. He'd seen her speak before, but tonight felt different. Celine looked like a woman who had arrived, not as someone's wife, not as a whispered story, but as her own name. "You're okay," Janessa whispered as she leaned over. Mail smiled. "Better than okay." She looked towards Celine. "She's glowing. She is. And you. I'm exactly where I want to be." Half an hour later, Brennan arrived. He wasn't invited, but he came anyway, showing up in a crisp grey suit and a smug half-smile. His new fiancée lingered behind him, scanning the room like she didn't belong. He didn't even try to hide his entrance. He walked straight through the front with a donor's name on his lips. Celine spotted him from across the room. Her heart didn't race. Her chest didn't tighten. She didn't crumble. Instead, she straightened her back and turned away, choosing Miles' eyes instead. Brennan made his rounds, pretending to belong, but the whispers started quickly. Didn't he divorce her right before the grant? I heard he cheated, and then tried to cut her out of everything. He's with that influencer now, right? Celine didn't need to say a word. Her presence made the truth loud enough. At the podium, the director tapped the mic. Tonight, we recognize a woman whose contribution helped over 120 adult students receive their GEDs, employment readiness training, and a real chance at freedom. Celine's name echoed through the hall. People clapped. Some stood. And Mael? He stood the tallest. She walked up, accepted the Crystal Award with a soft smile, and began. "I once believed silence was strength," she said, her voice even. "That if I stayed quiet, polite and easy to be around, I'd be safe, loved, respected." She paused. "But then I realized silence was just another name for fear. So I chose something louder. I chose truth. I chose myself. And from that, everything changed." The room fell into silence, and then applause, a wave of it. But Brennan couldn't clap, because every word she said was a mirror, and he didn't like the reflection. He approached her afterward, cornering her near the bookshelf display. "You could have acknowledged me," he said lowly. She looked up. "For what?" "For everything we built." Celine cut him off. "I built. You just occupied space." His nostrils flared. "I'm not your villain, Celine." "No," she said calmly. "You were mine, but I forgave you anyway." He blinked. "Not for you, for me. So you don't get to rewrite this narrative anymore. Not here, not ever." Then she turned to Mael, who'd silently walked up behind her. Brennan stepped back, and this time, he was the one dismissed. Later that night, back at Mael's place, they stood in the kitchen again. He poured 2 glasses of wine. She leaned on the counter, still barefoot, still glowing. "That felt final," she whispered. "It was, and freeing." He smiled. "You always had the keys, Celine." She walked over, took his hand, and rested her cheek against his chest. "I don't know where this is going," she whispered. "But I want to find out with you." Mael kissed the top of her head. "I've waited my whole life for this version of you." Celine didn't need saving. She needed seeing. And now she saw herself clearly. Loved, respected, whole. And as the night stretched on, one truth sat steady in her heart. Her story didn't end with betrayal. It began with her refusal to break. 6 months later, the breeze was gentle over the water, the dock warm beneath Celine's bare feet. Spring had settled over the Carolinas, painting the sky soft blue and scattering petals along the lakeside. She exhaled slowly, letting the quiet wrap around her. This wasn't an escape. This was hers. The cottage she now owned sat on the edge of a private lake, surrounded by tall trees and peace. It had been her dream property years ago when she and Brennan once browsed listings. Back then, he called it too quiet. Now, it was everything she needed. Inside, a manuscript sat on the table. Her story. An editor from a mid-sized publishing house had offered her a deal after reading her first blog post on surviving betrayal while reclaiming your voice. Her inbox now overflowed with messages from women across the country, women who stayed silent, women who had been called too much, too emotional, or ungrateful, women who finally found the words because Celine gave them permission. The screen door creaked open. Mael stepped out, 2 mugs in hand. Lemon ginger or lavender. Celine smiled. "You remembered?" He handed her the lavender blend, then sat beside her on the dock. Their legs dangled above the water, and the silence between them felt easy. "Your publisher called," he said after a while. "Yeah? Wants you in New York for the reading. They think the book could chart." Celine sipped her tea. "I'm still deciding." "Why?" "Because this," she looked around, "feels more like success than anything I ever dreamed of in a glass tower." He nodded. "You've already arrived." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You think so?" Mael turned slightly and looked at her. "Celine, you're free." There was no ring yet, no wedding date, no rush. They were taking their time, rebuilding what trust meant. Mael never pushed, never rushed her healing. He just showed up, every single day. He came to therapy. He listened when she spiraled. He held her when memories came back sharp, and when she wanted space, he gave it. Not because he didn't care, but because he did. Meanwhile, Brennan's new firm had lost a major deal. One of the clients read Celine's blog post and pulled out. Another followed. And soon, investors walked. Brennan tried to sue for defamation, but there was no lie to sue. Celine's story had never named him. She only told the truth, her truth, and sometimes the truth is all it takes. He showed up at the cottage once, late afternoon, uninvited. Mail wasn't home. Celine answered the door alone, standing in yoga pants and a sweatshirt that said, "Resilience is a quiet rebellion." Brennan looked thinner, older. He held a small envelope in his hand. "I came to say I'm sorry," he said. She didn't answer. "And thank you for not ruining me publicly." "You could have. I would have deserved it." Celine folded her arms. "You're not here for me, Brennan. You're here for you." He swallowed. "Maybe, but thank you for confirming what I already knew, that walking away was the best thing I ever did." She didn't take the envelope. She closed the door and locked it. Weeks later, the reading in New York sold out. Celine stood on stage, holding her book. The final chapter read, "To every woman who has been made to shrink, to every person who has rebuilt from silence, you don't need to shout to be heard. You need truth. And truth, when you choose it, will always choose you back." The crowd rose. Tears streamed. Even Mail, who sat in the front row, looked up at her like he was still learning new parts of her every day. Because he was. Later that night, they walked through the quiet streets of Manhattan. She wore a black trench coat. He carried their leftover pasta in a paper bag. "I got you something," he said, stopping under a street lamp. Celine turned. "No pressure," he said. "It's not a ring." She laughed. He pulled out a small leather notebook. On the cover, embossed in gold, Celine's next chapter. Inside, the first page read in his handwriting, "Whatever you write next, I'm here, always." She looked up, eyes soft. "No matter where it takes me, even if it's far, and if I fall, I'll remind you how to rise." They didn't kiss under that street lamp. They didn't rush anything. They walked, hand in hand, because healing wasn't fast. But love, real love, could wait. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who thought you'd never walk away? Someone who thought your silence meant weakness? Celine didn't burn it all down. She built something stronger. And in the end, her power didn't come from revenge. It came from choosing herself. So let's talk. What moment hit you the hardest in this story? Have you ever chosen healing over revenge, or walked away and found peace on your own terms? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let someone else know they're not alone by sharing this video. And if this story moved you, if you felt seen, heard, or inspired, tap like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. Because here on Mr. Charles Stories, we tell the kind of stories that don't just entertain. They restore you. See you in the next one.